Hi, I'm with Lenny Larson, President Emeritus of NALC Branch 9, Minneapolis. Hi, Lenny.
How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for coming today. How long have you been a letter carrier in Minneapolis?
Well, I'm currently retired, but I began my career in November of 1967.
Okay. And how long have you been a union member and active in the union?
Well, I joined the union right after my probationary period back, so that would have been, early 1968. Then I had 2 years military leave, and I left 1 year on my own volition and came back. So out of all that time, I've been gone for 3 years.
Okay.
But the rest of it was, and then I got active in the union shortly after I came back to work.
Okay. And when you were active in the union, what sort of positions or titles did you hold, or what activities did you take part in?
Well, I took part in a lot of branch activities, the social events and whatnot, but I held a position of steward, chief steward, trustee, executive vice president, and president.
Yeah. And in your years involved in the union, have you seen more diverse members treated different or treated less than equal to their white counterparts?
Well, I had a concern about it early on because I even had a postmaster early on in my career as a full-time officer asked me why it seemed to be there was so little diversity in the letter carrier craft. And back then there wasn't a whole lot of diversity. But yeah, we did see it coming because, the high amount of immigration back in the 80s and 90s and more of the people coming from other countries even that were having difficulty speaking the language were coming in and passing a test and becoming letter carriers. So. Yeah, I didn't see any outright discrimination against them. I think I did with one supervisor, but I can't prove it. So,
yeah.
But we had more of the problem with them struggling with the language barriers and acclimating to, just being an American citizen.
Yeah. So do you think any of those barriers may have prevented some of those members from getting more involved in union business?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Because, just the fact that the language barriers were there and, coming from foreign cultures and whatnot, they had to get acclimated to that before they understood. In fact, I have a carrier that I spoke to a few years back who came from the continent of Africa, where there had been a lot of, slayings and whatnot going on. And she told me that her uncle and her brother and her father, all three had tried to get in unions over there and been murdered for their activities in trying to form a union. So yeah, needless to say, when people come from that type of a background, you have a little bit to overcome their natural fear of, a union.
Okay. Now, do you think over time that diversity in our own union has increased? There's been more diverse membership, or do you think we could do better to bring more of those people in?
I think we could do better. I think it's improved considerably. To the point where we've had folks come in where we've had to have stewards go over because of language barriers and discuss issues, work issues with them. But I think there's still room for improvement.
Okay. Now, last year, in June 2011, there was an article in the Postal Record, our national publication, talking about how African American letter carriers who were not allowed to join the NALC in the past were denied membership, and a lot of them signed up with the National Alliance on postal and federal employees.
Right.
And the article talked about how because those carriers weren't allowed to join the union, that today they are not reaching their 50 years of service in the union. They're not being recognized for that. Now, can you talk about that article? Because you tried to pass a motion that did successfully pass, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that article inspired you to come up with the idea for the motion.
Well, the article inspired me. I'm trying to think of how I can phrase this. Actually, I'd had a concern about those issues for years because a number of years ago when I'd started, I'd heard the stories about the black carriers being in separate sections of conventions, and there was still a lot of discriminatory practices going on, but you never heard a whole lot about it, needless to say. So when that article came out, what struck me about it was the honesty of the NALC to admit that they had made that kind of a mistake. And then, to my way of thinking, I served in the military with minorities from all over the world, and I just couldn't see how people could be treated in that manner. So I proposed a resolution that anybody that was a minority that tried to join the NALC and was not allowed to, if they had joined the alliance and then came into the NALC when they were allowed to, that they be given credit for that entire time. And it'll be taken up at the National Convention this summer.
Okay, that'd be great. Are you aware if there are any carriers in Minneapolis that were part of the National Alliance and denied membership in the NALC here in Minneapolis? I know it was pretty popular in the South.
I don't know of any personally. I don't know of any. I've heard of a few from like out east, but locally, I never met anybody that had been denied.
Okay, and then based on all the years of experience, do you have any suggestions on ways we can maybe reduce or eliminate some of those barriers to try and encourage more diverse members in participating?
Well, one of the things we tried a number of years ago was a diversity committee within the branch, and to be honest, it failed. I don't think we were quite ready for it at the time. Each person was coming in looking for the union to be a voice for their particular form of discrimination that they were suffering. So what we were just trying to do was get in all the different people, minorities, gays, blacks, Asians, everybody together on a committee to find out if they were having barriers with management, if they were being discriminated against because of their color or their sexual preferences. And we didn't have much luck with it. It didn't go very far. But as the years progressed, the Postal Services formed diversity committees. The union usually has a member on there. But I think the Postal Service itself could do better by going out into the minority community. I mean, if you take a look at Black history, and in Minnesota, they have the highest unemployment rate out there. And I think that as a government agency, they have an obligation to get out into the field and start going into these schools and recruiting these people and letting them know that it is a good career to get into, and you don't have to have a master's degree to do it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.